Hello, everybody. I'm Jane Michelle Almond,
And I'm Julian Malaman.
and welcome back to Darling in the Franxx 5 years later, a retrospective where we take a frankly inappropriately scholarly tone with this very silly show
Oh dear.
that we are revisiting for its dubious fifth anniversary. So Julian, I think it's fair to say this second batch of 5 episodes we've got going on. Um,
Let's just say it's a lot more uneven than the first five.
yeah, yeah,
Uh that's
yeah.
the nice way of putting it.
Like we start off really strong, right? With like one of the best
Yeah.
episodes. I'll just say I think like one of the best episodes of the show, and then we end
Hmm.
on a very sour and weird note with episode 10, which is
Hmm.
one of the
Okay.
ones where things start to fall apart. Although the cracks start showing even a little bit before that, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Let's start with the two of the best episodes. Well, okay, one of the two of the best episodes of the bunch. Which is the fifth episode, sixth episode.
Sixth episode, yeah.
Wow. Brain fence post error. Oh no.
Trust me, I had to okay, behind the scenes moment for everybody real quick. When I was trying to figure out how to chunk out these episodes, I had to do the math like 5 different times to make sure I wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is episodes
It's
six
a
to
mood.
ten inclusive. Anyway,
Hmm.
yeah, episode 6. It's like pretty good.
Yeah, it opens with, as you put it, Ichigo's legendary bag fumble. Oh boy.
There is yes, there is a scene towards the start of the episode where Ichigo is clearly gearing up to talk to Hiro about something pretty clearly, like her feelings on him and just in general. Uh, and what she ends up saying is to directly quote the subtrack, "I've always seen you as a sibling," unquote. And like
And Hero's just like,
curl,
yeah, me too.
it's bad. Yeah,
And it's like the yeah, like uh yeah, I think that you said immediately after that, like, was something along the lines of, wow, way to cock block yourself.
yeah. No, just like
Just holy shit.
just absolute dropping of the ball. But that's actually not really like the main focus of the episode. The main
No,
focus of the
it's just an
episode,
extremely funny moment,
yeah,
inadvertently.
it's a genuinely amusing moment. I think kind of on purpose, but maybe not to
Yeah.
the extent that the
Yeah,
show
it's like
is aware
it
of.
hurts, but and that's also on purpose, but it's also like, wow, you like just struck the fuck out. Jeez. But yeah, most of it is long fight scenes.
Yeah. We pick up with the thread from the end of the last chunk with there is, I believe, an encroaching Klaxosaur on the plantation, and the squadron, who are the main stars of the show, Squadron 13, team up with Squad 26, who are a group of very minor characters, and the main point is to illustrate that, like, hey, our protagonists are they're all like dysfunctional teenagers, and they've got all these quirks and stuff. Whereas Squad 26 are like incredibly straight laced and very, all business. Uh, to the point even of their mechas, their
Hmm.
FranXXs, all look identical and just have like different weapons. Um, so
Yeah.
there is a lot of emphasis in the fight scene, which it takes up the majority of the episode. It's mostly an action episode. Um, there's sort of a contrast, like a push and pull between the very individualistic fighting that the main protagonists have going on, and the much more regimented stuff that Squad
Hmm.
26 do.
And also, like, it really comes to the fore is that, like, while they're more regimented and they're able to, like, put themselves in less danger while, defeating sort of the auxiliary Klaxosaurs that the big one sends out,
Mm.
the thing is that they're not terribly, for one thing, they're not terribly imaginative when it comes
No.
to actually fighting these things. They have one way of dealing with their problems, and when doesn't work out for them, when they try to attack the main thing, which is an impressively designed, very strange monster, which appears as a giant cube initially,
Yeah.
um, that fails miserably, and they have no idea how to cope with that. And their sort of informal leader, or I guess he might actually be the leader of the group, we're never really given his name. I think we get his like code briefly in like the last episode.
Yes, we
Yeah,
do. We definitely do. But also, if you expect us to remember that, come
he's a
on.
very sort of like the fact that he is so anonymous is kind of the point,
Yeah.
and like that he's the most distinct of all of them simply by dint of the fact that he talks more,
Yes.
and he's just like he and like his co-pilot, their Franks becomes loses fuel dealing with the giant Klaxosaur problem, and so they're stranded and have to be rescued by, is it like, God, is it Ichigo and Goro, or like Zorome and Miku, I
It's
think.
one of the two pairs. I forget which.
Yeah,
Um,
wind up
there's
rescuing
a
them.
yeah, there's a whole stretch there where you get to see how our protagonists fight in like in the way that they're intended to, like from like a tactical point of view,
Mm-hmm.
which is mostly fun because again it's just a very very good looking episode from like it, it's one of those things where like for the most part, Darlifra, it's not super obvious which episodes are done by Trigger and which ones are done by the studio that would shortly become known as Cloverworks.
Yeah,
This
that
one,
division of A1. Yeah.
this one, it's very obvious as a Trigger episode. There's a lot of like, I mean, their animation style is fairly distinct. There's a lot of
Mm.
smearing and it's very cartoony. Um, Also, the battle banter is littered with innuendo. Just a lot of,
Yes.
just a lot of like, wow, I didn't know how good this would feel and stuff like that. And it's like,
Yeah. I mean, which, you know, again, if the show were just this, then
yeah.
sure.
Uh,
That would be, it'd be like kind of amusing. And it is kind of amusing just
oh,
isolated of context.
the,
Oh no.
the police are coming for us, Shredney. It's the anime cops.
It's the
Um,
anime cops.
yeah,
Uh, like, for us admitting that Darling the Franks has its moments.
yeah,
They're gonna, you're gonna get us. Um, uh, God, but like, yeah, it's just so basically, yeah, the Squad 13 have been, until the Squad 26 get into really serious trouble, uh, are sort of auxiliaries,
yeah.
and and initially seem like just totally disorganized, and they are, but also like are just, despite the fact that they put themselves into more danger through their chaotic sort of fighting style, they also manage to kill a lot more of the little auxiliary enemies.
Yeah, the
Um,
little I don't know what
and
you'd call them,
and
rogues or
ultimately,
whatever.
they also demonstrate, like, again, the sort of daring to actually go out and rescue the
Yes.
head of Squad 26, and then later Strelitzia,
Yeah.
Hero and Zero Two's mech is kept at the back,
Yeah,
and
I
the
want to
head of
cut
Squad
in.
26 is terrified of them.
yeah, I want to cut in before we get to the Strelitzia mini plot in this particular episode. Uh, the other thing with this episode is that the directing is really interesting. I called it arty in my notes.
Yeah.
They employ this tactic here, and I think they do it back in the first episode of the show also, and I don't remember if we pointed it out. But they do this thing where there will be an important shot, and a character will be narrating, and they will cut to a black screen with like a line of text on it.
Which
and,
is,
yep,
it's very. We both pointed this out as super Evangelion.
Yeah,
it's like aggressively Evangelion-ish, with like a hint, which kind of makes sense given Nishigori's past work, like with a hint of Shaft thrown in just for good measure. Which is that like the most extreme version of that being Bakemonogatari, just like bam 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 text, you know.
Yeah, it's not nearly as extreme in Darlifra, but there's enough of that there to give it a distinct identity. If you look at like other stuff that aired in 2018, compared to a lot of that, you know, it does stand out visually speaking. And I want to talk a bit more about that, but to talk a bit more about that, we have to get back to the Strelitzia thing. Because... help me out here. What is the exact chain of events here that ends up... that like, Hero and 02 end up going out?
Basically, that the Squad 26 does not predict that the... And I love that they're called Gutenberg class Klaxosaurs. They're really fucking huge ones.
Yes.
I have no idea why they're called that, but sure, let's go with it. This giant cube monster first sends out like these massive shockwaves, and then after that transforms as they're trying to like lasso it, and just fucks all of them up. Like, turns into this horrible, like, horned, tiny-headed, bulky punching beast, and it just sort of starts just like coming directly towards the plantation with just, you know, destroying everything in its wake.
Yeah.
And Strelitzia, it's like, you know, 02 and Hero are like, yeah, okay, this is our chance. This is our point where we need to like intervene.
Yes.
And you know, and like they've been confined to the back again because like the head of Squad 26 has like, and also several other members of Squad 26 have heard of 02 and seen what she can do and find her really frightening.
Yes.
Like they think she's nuts. And she's like, fuck you. But, you know, you can understand their trepidation, especially given like the way that they fight, as opposed to the way that 02 especially solo fights.
Yeah, and you especially understand that when you get to the end of the episode, which continue with your summary so we can.
So Strelitzia, you know, goes forward and attacks the giant lumbering Klaxosaur, and that doesn't go well because the thing, as soon as they seem to be in a position to like try to kill the thing, like they're spearing the thing, it shapeshifts again into an enormous steam hammer, and literally hammers them into a wall.
And like when we say hammers them into a wall, we do mean that extremely literally. It just turns into a big, like, again, like a steam hammer kind of thing. It just bang, bang, bang them into the side of the plantation's like outer wall. And what happens is, like, predictably, both Zero Two and Hero get hurt. Hero more so, uh, and we get this like hallucination or something from his point of view. I called it sex limbo in my notes, where you know you get it's a fairly effective fake out, and you do start to think like, oh my god, are they going to kill this kid? They don't.
Yeah,
Um, but
but yeah, he hallucinates the scene from the first episode
yes,
of the departure of Nami, who we still don't know if she's actually alive or not.
mm-hmm.
So that adds to the vibe. Is like him sort of like saying goodbye, and basically she calls him out in
Yeah,
this. You know,
uh,
like you like, oh, you're backing down now,
yeah. Well,
coward.
specifically, what he tries to say to her, to this
Yeah.
hallucination of Naomi, or maybe it is her ghost. Whatever your interpretation is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what he tries to say to her is like, well, if I go out fighting as a FranXX pilot, that's all that matters. And she gets through to him enough that, uh, like,
He
yeah,
Yeah, he then sees a vision of Zero Two,
yeah,
and Zero Two is turned away from him, looks back at him, and then turns away as he's trying to talk to her. And
yeah,
then so he is forced by this vision to open his actual eyes, and you see that like his
yeah,
body is being, throughout the whole earlier part of the fight, this was happening, was that the blue blood creep from this weird mass over his heart that's occurred, that apparently is a thing with people who partner with Zero Two, which resembles Klaxosaur blood, incidentally, probably foreshadowing,
hmm,
um, has crept up into his neck and is slowly poisoning him.
yeah,
And he's like, the veins in his eyes are straight to almost to bursting, and he opens his eyes and he sees Zero Two fighting herself,
yeah,
and just completely feral.
yeah, just like
And
clawing at the cockpit. And I actually want to point out specifically the lighting in that scene is like
mm,
really, really bright and direct with
and
like,
flat.
yeah, it really resembles some of the stuff with Satsuki in Kill la Kill, and I kind of wonder if there's some staff overlap between
Mm.
that stuff in that show and this in this one. Um, but yeah, no, like she's like going at the cockpit like a wild animal, and it is only through him realizing that he now has something else that he wants to fight for other than just strictly being, a tool of war, that, you know, kind of brings both of them back from the brink. And it's actually a very nicely animated sequence. I'm going to geek out on you here for a second, pardon me. There's actually like a really nicely animated sequence where when they like, get it back together, uh, the Strelitzia transforms back from its like bestial four-legged form into the humanoid form. It's just very
Mm.
nicely done.
Yeah.
It actually kind of reminds me of the really elaborate transformation sequences in Transformers Armada, which is a
Mm.
thing that is also homaged in another Trigger show from 2018, SSSS Gridman. So there's a thought for you.
Mm. And then
um,
there's also, it's also like there's the precursor to that, is when Hero finally forces himself to move to calm Zero Two, because it's like that moment of like real empathy, of
yes.
understanding that like her desperation isn't simply animal, it's also very human. It's like he sees her for what she is. There's that recognition of someone as an equal.
Mm-hmm.
And that he doesn't that he understands her for a moment, like in a way that not a lot of other people are even willing to. And so he reaches out and embraces her,
Mm-hmm.
and her eyes go from that berserk red that they sometimes go into back to the sort of green.
Yeah.
And there's sort of the pose is very similar to one of Gustav Klimt's famous paintings, which again, another that visual reference showed up when Zero Two first, embraces him.
Yeah.
And most anime fans will recognize homages to Gustav Klimt most from like the infamous opening to Elfen Lied. But it's like I don't know why that's a recurring art thing in
Hey,
certain
listen.
divisive anime, but
There's some big Klimt heads in the anime industry.
I mean, he was a great artist. Uh, but like, yeah, it's like just this very striking visual, and at the point where the rest of Squad 13 are convinced that Hero is dead because
Yeah.
the Strelitzia has transformed into its
Yeah.
animal form, which
Most
is when
notably,
Zero Two pilots
yeah,
it.
the one who was like most impacted by thinking that obviously is Ichigo, who uh just
Yeah,
immediately becomes just despondent to the point where her mecha stops working because
yeah,
she can't focus on anything other than
just
you know
complete heartbreak.
yeah
And then you get the triumphant moment that you were describing, which is that it just this beautiful sort of transformation sequence,
yeah
and they manage to rally the group to like first they fight back the steam hammer, and it twists like
mm-hmm
putty,
yeah
and it's very striking. And then they manage to like sort of
well they
entrap
yeah
this beast.
and then they kind of finish it by like impaling it and lifting it up and these fucking huge uh like wings of glowing energy sort of burst out of the tip of the Strelitzia spear, which now that I'm saying it that way sounds actually far more innuendo-y than it actually looks in the show.
No, it's
It's
very
actually
it's
yeah
extremely end of Evangelion.
yeah that's
Like
that's more than anything yeah that
just like the giant wings as it rises, because you don't see the Strelitzia directly when this happens,
mm.
but then the wings turn in and turn into daggers of light that burst the thing apart.
Yeah,
It is
it's
very
just
striking.
yeah, it's just like a very striking and above all else, just a really fucking cool sequence. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, easily
just yeah.
it's just like again, episode 6 is easily my favorite of these couple that we watched, these five that we
Yeah, there.
watched.
I think that my favorite actually is one of the ones that happens later, but we'll get to that
Okay,
one.
yeah,
Jane knows which one this is. Um, but we'll get to it.
do I? I'm trying to think.
Oh no, you do.
Okay,
But
hmm. You
uh,
probably told me while we were
the
watching,
Goro episode.
and it. Oh, okay, yeah, that's okay.
Anyway, so yeah, so this they managed to just decimate this thing, and yeah, it's and then there's also the callback to the John Bird thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
they there is a little bit of you could argue maybe the narration at the end kind of verges on cloying a little bit, but I don't know. I
there's
will
way more cloying
yeah
in
no
these
I will rake Darlivra's being extremely like so on the nose that the term doesn't even apply anymore about things later on in this episode. I will give it that in episode 6 specifically, I think it's mostly pretty sweet, like genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a scene at the toward the very end of the episode, which is was kind of like a minor meme when this show
Yes.
was airing. I don't know if people remember this at all, but there's a bit where like Ichigo sees that Hiro is still alive and cries, and the way that she's drawn is very like,
It's cute.
yeah, that's basically
Um,
it. It's just like
but
she looks
it's
like a
like,
sad puppy or something.
yeah, and it's like, and it's really, and also just conveys a lot about her character right there.
Yes.
Like, and it's really good as like a state something that annoys you post Ichigo's face.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
very
You know,
funny. It's like it's a good like, like,
how I feel when I realize I will never have a dinosaur GF or whatever. You know. Yeah.
or like they're they're out of chicken tenders. Fuck you.
What?
I mean, that's the vibe too. It's
Skin
how dare they?
Okay. I mean, you know,
I
whatever.
mean, yes.
Um, so like that's the thing, right? Episode 6, genuinely really good, ends on a high note. Before before we say anything else, I want you to take, you the listeners, okay? I want you to take a moment, and if you have not seen this show, I want you to just think, what's like the weirdest fucking transition they could do? What's like the weirdest possible follow up that that episode could have? And if you said beach episode, congratulations, come collect your prize. Because
Yeah,
episode 7 is a beach episode.
an actual beach
It
episode.
just
It
fuck
is.
kind of
It
out
is
of
so.
absolutely fucking nowhere.
Yeah, it is just. Yeah, I was like agog at
Yes.
at that it cuts to like, oh my god, they're doing a fucking beach episode like it's
I
2004.
I like this is
Ah,
one this is one where like again I had the dubious privilege of being there and watching the show as it aired, and I do distinctly remember that this was the first one where people were just kind of like, huh, you know, because this is also not the worst episode of the bunch by a long shot.
not by a long shot.
But it's a weird move, right?
It is a very it is the strangest episode of them,
Yeah,
arguably. Like the worst episode is the second strangest, but
we'll get to
it is
that.
the strangest episode
Yeah.
in a
Uh,
lot of ways, like tonally especially, because it's like it is the first time that it dinged our are the straights okay counter.
it did, yeah. I would actually say that mine went off twice during this batch of 5 episodes. I forgot to note the second
Yes.
one, but I'll rest assured
Yes.
I will bring it up when we get to that. But uh, the episode is, it's not devoid of plot development, and I'm not just saying that to
Not at
make,
all.
ye ancient joke about haha plot. Um, but like it's mostly just character exercises, which is all beach episodes are. I mean, at the best of times, it's an excuse to shuttle the cast somewhere, put the girls in skimpy outfits, and then you know
And occasionally the guys in skimpy outfits.
true,
Like, let's be
and
real.
just have the cast like screw around for half an hour. Which again,
And
there's nothing wrong with that, and
character interactions,
yeah,
like pure character
yeah,
interaction.
there's nothing wrong with that. And from a point of view of like episode 6 ending like the first big threat of the series, I do kind of get putting it there. That doesn't mean that anybody would have seen it coming. But yeah, no, literally the Nana, their caretaker, is just like, yeah, the boss man said we can go on vacation today, and they just find a beach, and yeah, like,
Yeah, just in the middle of nowhere, they do find the edge of the ocean and a place with vegetation.
mm-hmm,
And it's like, huh, in the middle of this weird wasteland,
yeah,
there's just like a normal ass beach. mostly normal. We'll get to
Yeah.
that. And so like it opens with like just sort of standard beach shenanigans, and then like the uh the 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 three, like normal-ish straight guys in the group, which is to say Goro, uh Futoshi,
And
and
Zorone.
Zorone,
Yeah.
you know, like sort of ganging up to cause problems.
Yes.
Um,
There is a whole
well,
lot of
Heroes off with 02 being
yeah.
sort of a wife guy.
Yes. Like there's a whole lot of because part of the problems that they cause are to Hero. They kind of like pull him away from Zero
Yes.
too. And there's a whole lot of like talking about kissing in the way that actual teenagers talk about sex. It is extremely like 1-to-1, but
Which is where I like when
yeah.
they gang up on Hero and demand to know about kissing.
Yes.
It is like that's when I went, are the straights okay? Now, granted, they are being observed this whole time by Mitsuru and Ikuno, the most like, and okay, I got basically confirmation about Mitsuru not being straight later, but that's another thing. But like the way that he's just such an asshole to Ikuno about Ikuno looking at Ichigo.
Yeah. Ikuno again, like
It's
technically very minor spoilers here. Ikuno is the gay one. Like that
like
is her designated.
explicitly.
Yeah, that is her designated role in the narrative. It's she is the token lesbian in Darlie cast. Um,
And she just kind of like ever so subtly is like she's just sitting reading her book
mhm.
and talks to Ichigo and like looks at her in a way just like, oh, she's so nice and so pretty, basically.
Yeah,
Like that look, like which is if you were a queer person as
raised
a
in a
teenager,
society
yeah,
with no vocabulary for really even straight relationships, much less gay ones. Um,
then it's like
you know,
that look.
you can kind of get what they're going for. Um, but
And
like
then
again, like the whole beach, just to
yeah.
sum up, like that whole part of the episode is definitely the first bit where I was like,
Hmm.
you know, what are we doing here?
Yeah. And then but yeah, like Mitsuru, who is her partner and again has like some weird stuff going on with Hiro. Uh he like sort of needles her about that,
mm,
like low key in a subtextual way, and then basically does the you and I are much alike, aren't we? The sort of
yeah,
the
and
thing
then
that is generally reserved for villains and even more on the nose shows. And then
yeah,
she's like, we're not anything alike.
yeah, no, Ikuno telling him basically just telling him to fuck off is a minor highlight of the episode.
Yeah, but it's like it also confirms that the gays are not okay.
Yeah, no, you know.
um, and it's like, yeah, it's like, although it is sort of funny in a way that in some ways Ikuno has her shit together way better than Mitsuru does.
Hmm.
For now.
Yeah.
For now.
So we should get to talking about the actual like plot development that happens in this episode, which I guess is
All right.
really more of a world building development, but there is a thing that happens that will have repercussions later. That's not a spoiler to say.
Which, yeah, they find a cave,
Mhm.
and my initial joke was, "Oh yay, it's the Bokurano cave. Maybe this will turn into a better show." Um,
And then I laughed in confusion because I've never seen Bokurano.
Bokurano opens with them finding a cave, and then bad things happen. That's all I'm gonna say. Watch
yeah.
Bokurano. It's a better show than this. Um, Even with the director and the mangaka being at each other's throats
Treadney.
by the end. Uh,
Julian.
that is all I'm saying. All I'm saying. Anyway, they find in the cave stairs,
Yes.
and it leads up the cliff face surrounding it to an abandoned town.
Mm-hmm.
And they wander around this town, and it's pretty standard like Japanese beach town, right?
Yeah.
And then they find something fucking weird.
Yeah. They find a building, the exact function of which is not spelled out, but it definitely seems to be like a small medical clinic or something of that nature. But it's also a home, so it was clearly like an orphanage or a daycare or something as well.
Or for possibly for prenatal care
Yeah,
for mothers who don't have somewhere to
yeah.
go, given some
And
of the literature that one of them finds.
yes, and as I was gonna get to, they realize it looks a lot like the house that they live in on the plantation.
Yeah, like Ikuno picks up on it immediately and is
Yes.
like, "Oh yeah, I get the feeling that they based our building on this. I don't know why though.
Yeah.
Weird."
I mean, to be honest, the fact that she says that always, like, well, not always, but it did strike me as, like, you don't need to point that out. Like,
You don't
come
need to
on.
spell out the subtext,
You
but at the
know,
same time, it does sort of fit Ikuno's character in
that's
that she's
true.
like surrounded by like honestly people who are just like who she I think kind of thinks of as just absolute children. So it's like, do I have to spell it out for you? I'll spell it out for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that is actually a pretty decent character moment, even if it is
Yeah.
not the best storytelling moment,
But,
which tells you a lot about the show in general in a more bigger
yeah.
way.
But
Um,
the other thing that happens is that Kokoro, who is again the one with the long floofy hair, who was kind of before this point is very not developed as a character at all. This is kind
she's
of
the nice one.
yeah, this is kind of the first point where anything happens with her as a character. Uh, she finds a book about like taking care of babies
And pregnancy.
and pregnancy, and
And
she
she's transfixed by it.
yeah, and there is an interesting thing where not only is she transfixed by it, she seems to understand on a immediate level that this is like not something she should have, so she hides it.
And the person who notices her hiding it initially is Mitsuru,
Mm-hmm.
and hmm, that goes places.
Yes.
Uh, so like at the same time, uh, like Ichigo is walking around and notices an old video rental store and like some people kissing in a
Like an
romance
old
show
movie poster, yeah, or
poster.
something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, like, and just sort of, and then gets cornered by Zero Two, who, being the bisexual Sex Panther, just like,
Well, okay, no, I'm going to call you out. The note that you wrote verbatim is quote, "Why is Zero Two such an absolute Chad?"
no,
Question mark
that's about a
unquote.
later episode.
Is it? I thought that was
Yeah,
about
that was
this.
about no, that was about the next episode. Is like
Okay.
when she
Damn,
just
my bad.
utterly fucking deflates a bunch of people in an excellent way, which we will get to.
I've
But no,
spoiled the
but
next
yeah, like,
segment. No, but go on.
but just she just kabedons like Ichigo, just like leans in and is like basically uh, there is a conversation about kissing, and it's like goes sort of like, well, I've kissed somebody before, and it's like, oh, have you
Yeah,
now? And
it's
it's like,
very again like it's extremely like teenagers talking about sex to the point
it's
where
like
it is barely qualifies as a
it is,
metaphor.
and it's also because it's Zero Two. It's like an inch away from like the show actually becoming sublime and her being like, "Want to join my polycule?"
You know, like it's a very easy joke to be like, the show would just be instantly fixed if
It wouldn't be
people knew
instantly
about
fixed, but it would be
polyamory.
better.
Yeah,
It would
that
be
it would
better.
be better. Yes.
Like,
There
just
are
yeah.
there are other problems. Anyway, um, but
But
yeah,
yeah,
that
just
that whole scene is something. um,
it's like it's very cat about to eat a bird.
yeah,
Um, but also it's genuinely reasonably funny
yeah,
but there is that like legit tension there of 02 knows way more about Ichigo than Ichigo thinks she knows.
yeah,
Like, which is it's like a again, the thing about this show, the character writing is very solid. It's the other stuff that's the problem.
yeah.
Um,
Well, spoiler: the character writing eventually falls off too. So,
oh, I can imagine
um,
because it gets impacted by all the other stuff.
yeah,
We'll talk about episode 10. Fuck.
yeah. But like
Um,
more to the
okay.
point, there is an interesting recurring thing that again like seems too subtle for this show, but nonetheless there it is. Where a lot of the times where there's scenes in this episode where the group is doing something and then 02 is like over kind of observing from a distance, which I thought was a nice touch. That sort of thing. Uh, that includes the last scene of the episode, which happens after they go back to the main part of the beach that night. Um, and everyone else is asleep. Uh,
Mm.
Hiro and Ichigo go for their little like night walk on the beach. And Ichigo once again tries to fess up to being into Hiro in a way that is not just as close friends and certainly not as siblings. Um,
And she very nearly actually does it.
yes,
Like,
there
good for you.
there is a stunning moment where she is literally like mid confession and a meteor shower starts overhead and just loses all interest in other people entirely because
Well,
ooh
he
shiny.
I mean, he is still like interested in what she's saying, but he's just like distracted for a second and is like interrupts her, and then she like he says, like apparently if you wish on a shooting star, it will come true. What's your wish?
Mm.
And then it's like she says, "I told you, dummy."
Mm-hmm.
Like just almost verbatim.
Yeah, and the episode
dumbass.
the episode ends on this sort of lightly teasing note. And then we cut to a shot of 02 reclining by herself on like a rock formation and
Yeah,
looking into
like
the meteor shower,
like
which I think is just
immediately
like a nice shot from like a cinematography kind of point of
but
view.
it's also like immediately before this, there was like a little thing of them like camping on the beach, and that 02 wanders off to go for a night swim, and they invite Hiro back into the squad basically, and also 02, but 02 isn't there. She's just distantly watching them doing stuff.
Well, yeah,
And
that's
it's like an interesting
yeah.
framing of the way that she kind of like feels.
That is what I was pointing out earlier. With
Yeah.
There's a couple scenes like that throughout the episode where she's like
Yeah.
noticeably separated from the group. But
And at the end, she's alone watching Hiro and Ichigo interact, and is just like, "Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I see you."
But it's a weird and an interesting episode. Not one of the better ones, not one of the worst ones either. Just like strange.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things where it's like if this was as bad as Darley Forever got, nobody would hate this show. I think it would be a lot more fondly remembered.
But unfortunately,
yeah, as we're about to get to, that is not the case. I'm actually going to put our
the immediately succeeding
Yes,
episode
no,
is
that
markedly worse.
I'm going to put a cut in here, and then we can discuss that one when we get back and we
Yeah,
resume.
I was about to ask about.
Yeah, of
All right,
course.
I will be back momentarily.
Okay, and we're back. So, so.
Boys versus Girls is this episode's title, essentially. He uses a
Wait,
Batsu
is that
instead of
actually
a.
the title, or are you
Yes.
speaking? Oh my
Yes,
god! Okay.
it's not a versus, it's a Batsu, but
Same
like an
idea.
X.
Yeah. Okay.
Same concept. Oh boy,
Oof.
this one has good moments, but is has
I
some of the most glaring problems
if
until
if
episode 10.
okay. So right off the top, I want to say that I think if for people who have not seen this show but dislike what they've heard about it, this is probably what they think most of the show is like. Um,
And it
an episode
isn't,
where
but
there is a very stupid, convoluted excuse to get the girls naked, um, and that ends with boys and girls sure are different in like
and we have to respect each other, but in a way which acknowledges our differences.
something. Here's your 1950s ass like
Thank
chauvinism.
you, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who, well, he's not with us anymore. Yay.
All right, hey.
Look,
We can't
look,
we can't get political in our Darling in the Franks podcast.
we can't get political in the show that invites Shinzo Abe jokes.
This I think
Jesus fucking
I'm not
Christ.
100% sure. I think this was the episode where those started being a thing.
Yeah, like really
Um,
started. Like you said that, like somebody made at least one about the beach episode, but like somewhere out there. But this is the one where it like
it's
just
I
became
mean
a
okay.
meme.
What happens is that we have a cold open and they're fighting a Klaxosaur. And it spews fucking acid all over all of the Franxes, and somehow
And,
this is able to melt a hole in the armor of the Franxes,
well, it
and
gets through the cracks.
yeah,
Is what
and the
happens.
oh okay, why did I misremember
Yeah,
that? But
like it doesn't actually damage the robots. That's actually the point. It's like, oh,
yeah,
it's not harming us. Oh, it's oozing in, and it gets on the girl's weird suit thing
which
and
would
starts
be
dissolving
bad
the thin
enough.
parts.
Yeah, but it starts dissolving them into nothing, and what can you even say? Like,
And Miku, who is partnered with Zorome, gets particularly offended by this because Zorome has no emotional maturity, and Miku, while she is generally more sensible than him, is also kind of a child. Um, like she literally is, but I mean more so than even the rest of the girls. Um, and just okay. It's also the moment where with Mitsuru and Ikuno, Mitsuru's response is to look away in disgust, like as you put it, begone vile temptress. And my
yeah,
response was just, oh yeah, I finally have confirmation that he's that kind of gay guy.
it's very like it. It's one of those
Like
things that's like so stereotypical it accidentally like stumbles backwards into like that is a kind of person, but if you think
yeah.
that like all gay men are that, like wow, you
No.
really need to
Yeah.
like you need to figure
Yeah.
some shit out.
Yeah.
Um,
But it is a kind of guy. And
yeah,
everything else about his characterization is a very specific kind.
yeah, but
Like
more
but like yeah.
importantly,
But more importantly, like it's like Futoshi tries to like play it cool, but he's so fucking awkward. And then Goro is like tries to be comparatively gentlemanly. Hiro is embarrassed, but like is maybe the least embarrassing of them.
yeah,
And like
and the girls are all,
Annoyed,
understandably
understandably,
kind of
at
like,
best,
yeah, pissed off that.
except for Zero Two, who's just like, look, shit happens.
Well, yeah, no, like again, they're understandably annoyed that their partners are
Yes,
leering at them essentially,
yes,
as this thing is happening. So what happens is we get this like fucking sitcom ass plot where Mikuru like unionizes the Miku, uh,
different show.
different show. Like unionizes the girls, and they do the fucking like running a line of tape down the middle of the house thing,
Yes,
where they're like,
and
"This is the boys' side, and this is the girls' side," and again, it's like a sitcom plot. Like, hey,
yeah, and it's like, and it's like Miku is the most dedicated to it. Ichigo is like offended on the other girl's behalf, but like isn't at like she starts out more committed and then just becomes less interested as it goes on. Kokoro is like she's a pushover, so she just goes along with it. Um, Ikuno again is like she 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 again is like
well,
not interested in male leering for
well,
yet
no,
other
her
reasons.
her reaction, she literally says something like, I think it's better this way or something. And it's like,
Yes,
yeah, I
she
bet
like
you do, sister.
yeah, I bet you do. I bet you like not having to, especially not having to talk to Mitsuru because he's a dick. Um, uh, but then like, although funnily enough, also Mitsuru is like, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
And the and of course Zorome is the most offended, like by far, and Futoshi is just like goes along with it because he's also kind of a pushover.
Mm-hmm.
And Goro is, I wish people would be more mature about this, but they're not. They're not gonna be. So I'm just gonna go along with this. And of course, Hero's over here, like being Hero. Zero Two just does not care about the lines because then she can go over and throw her arm around Hero and just be Zero Twoing it everywhere.
She's very flirtatious, yes. Which, like, I just realized this, which makes me feel kind of dumb. But like, she's literally crossing a line. Like,
Yeah,
do you,
she does not believe in
she
boundaries.
doesn't respect the boundaries. Do you understand?
Yeah. But like
Uh,
she actually kind of has like, and it becomes more and more obvious as it goes on that she has like a greater perspective on these things than like any of them do, and that it's like you like she straight up says to him, which inspired the absolute Chad comment, was that she just straight up says, "You do realize how frivolous this is? Like, I am like she at one point is helping them out, but after that we will talk about that. But I am skipping ahead a little. Is she just says, "Look, we're all gonna fucking die at some point, given what we do as our evocation, uh, avocation." Uh, but
you
it's
could have
like
just said job, Julian.
valid, valid.
Continue.
So like, so our job, what we do, could fucking kill us at any time, and you're really gonna be this fucking petty.
Yeah, I
And
I actually forget
like,
if if this is that part of that speech or if this is somewhere else. But she does say something along the effect of like, if you have something to say, you need to say it because
yes, and
we don't know if we're gonna be here tomorrow. Which,
yeah, and she just slams the door in their face
yeah,
after leaving the room. But okay, before that, they corner Zero Two after seeing her flirting with Hero and are like, you need to, like,
you need to toe the line.
yeah, back us up. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, you're boring. but I can make this less boring. Um, and so what happens is she plays a hell of a prank on all of them by
Setting it up so that to make a slightly convoluted story, less so. Uh, she sets it up so that the boys walk into the girls' bath while it is occupied.
And that causes
By
a fight.
yes,
And then she steals all of their clothing and
everyone's
runs
clothing.
up
Yes,
to the like everyone's clothing, period, and goes up to the roof, chased by Hero, and just throws it.
yeah.
Like just, and it is beautifully shot. There's also
It
trademark
is
aspect ratio
yeah.
change when she like swan dives off the roof and then does a
It
backflip.
is again like such a weirdly gorgeous rendition of such a deeply stupid premise for an episode. I mean,
But
like
it does,
the clothing theft thing is in character, but it's all
yeah,
very
because she thinks that everybody's being fucking stupid and she's gonna have fun with it.
which
Like, yeah,
yeah. I mean, to be fair to her, they are, and also to be even fairer to her, the show is also, which
being very stupid.
yeah, which like it. You pointed this out, and I agreed with you. Uh, of she almost kind of seems to understand at this point like the stakes better than the show itself does.
Yeah, she knows what is actually on the line,
Yeah.
and she just has like a better grasp of like what really should be the moral of the story that they keep avoiding,
Yeah.
really.
Well, like
um
it seems
like
like it in
look,
a show that was written by a fucking normal person. I'm sorry.
mm,
Uh, what the like theme through this episode would be
mm,
everybody's pretty much the same. Like mistakes happen and we all need to, you know, get along and like it doesn't make sense to hold these petty grudges against each other, right? Like that sort of seems like where it's going. Yes.
yeah, and then
Well, okay, we'll get to it then. Uh,
yeah,
it short version being it does not go there. Um, there is a thing in general with Zero Two, and if I can go on a little bit of a tangent here, there's a thing in general with Zero Two where, despite the fact that a bit later on, the show gets really deep into this, like, oh, is she really human question. Um, she seems to have a better understanding of people than anyone else,
mm,
and she always seems like she's about to get up to that line of like, this is all silly. Like you can't fit the human experience in these neat little boxes like this. Yeah, where
yeah,
like literally, because again, I mean, like you think of the very blunt visual symbolism of the episode is literally dividing the house in half between men and women. Um,
yeah,
and her literally crossing that line. Like you think it, or maybe you would think is like they're going to a place with this that is like uh, you know these things are all silly at the end of the day, and there is a lot more to being a person than what's between your legs.
mm. And
And that's not where the show goes.
yeah, because like
Because
it's we like compared it to like there are a couple of shows that have this sort of thing where there are characters who understand the assignment of the show better than
the people actually writing it. Yeah.
than the showrunners do. Like you said, Siesta from The Detective Is Already Dead.
Yeah,
The
that's
cafe,
to be fair, that's a
which
slightly different phenomenon.
yeah,
The thing that happens with 02 here is kind of unique in that a lot of the characters when this happens are characters who are not super present in the narrative.
Mhm.
02 is one of the protagonists. Like,
And like the closest thing in some ways, and I brought this one up, is Sweet Tengu from Speedgrapher, which is an even
yes,
worse show.
yeah, where
Like he
anyone who
and
wants our full opinions on that can go listen to the
yeah,
Speed Grapher episode of Keyframes for God.
where
But
I mercilessly simp for his second in command.
yes,
Yes.
that does happen. But you get this fucking like Xeno's paradox ass thing where 02 is like perpetually getting closer to
Yeah.
realizing this and like saying it, but never actually
Yeah.
gets there
Yeah,
because
because
the show is written by a moron.
yeah, it's
Like,
like she is trapped forever in a show that is less interesting than she is as a character.
yeah, it's kind of tragic. Which the specific form that this takes in this episode is it's not the last scene, but it's one of the last scenes where they've all resolved their differences, and there are these fucking like after school special fucking speeches about
Like Hero delivers one, Kokoro delivers the other.
yes, about just like boys and girls are different, but we need to learn to get along, and it's like you're
And like
you're so close to getting it, but you're getting too hung up on that first thing, which is
and
mostly
also
not true.
the way that Hero articulates it is particularly heavy on the sexual innuendo.
Yeah,
Um in so many ways that feel super fucking awkward. Um
to the point
uh
where it doesn't even like Hiro is such a weird character because there's episodes like episode 7, right? Where or
uh-huh.
no 6, sorry, episode 6,
Mm,
where he feels like pretty strongly written, and like
yeah.
you feel like he's sort of coming into his own as a person. And then there's episodes like this where he's just like a mouthpiece for the
Yeah.
director,
But then
and
they also
it's
kind of do that to, like, it's a little more in character for what we see of Kokoro, but it is
yeah,
still, like, feels forced. Like, it really does feel like they just warped the whole of the like, character writing in the show, which is, again, initially one of its strong points, and warp it around to just hammer home the point as aggressively as possible, um in the most Sunday school ass way possible.
yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ. They even have the sappy music in the background. It's so cool.
Yes, they do.
And like, and also it's worth noting that at least in terms of characterization on Kokoro's half of the speech is that she is hiding that book about prenatal care,
Yeah.
which, like,
Yeah,
is like
earlier in the
there's
episode, actually, there's a scene about that. If you want to
yeah,
talk about that
where
real quick.
okay, like she goes out to the greenhouse and Mitsuru is just kind of hanging out there, and Mitsuru is as close to normal with Kokoro as like he is to anybody. Like, he's actually almost nice to her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, but like he's just like, I like to go out here to think and just be alone, and they're being so irritatingly immature, and I just need to be alone. And it's like, I don't mind you being here though, that's fine. And Kokoro, of course, is like, she actually attends to the greenhouse and she starts talking about the language of flowers, which she's read about, uh which is like an interesting detail, that it's like such a 19th century thing that so they're given access to very specific information that perhaps Ape considers innocuous,
Mm-hmm.
but or it's like so dated and historical that like it can't be dangerous. There's a lot of weird stuff with Ape that starts popping in here. Again, knockoff Sele, knockoff Sele. um uh the but like she very clearly is like, it becomes very apparent that she has a hopeless crush on Mitsuru. Like, that it's developing,
Yeah.
but like, and it's like, setting aside my jokes, which I do think that there's like definite subtext that he's not straight, but it's also he is so emotionally unavailable that it's like my response was just to like meme on it. Is like, don't go in the simping for emotionally unavailable and distant man cave, little future girl.
Yeah, no, it's just
Mein Gott, this cave is full of plot
I'm
smoking.
going to kill you. Uh, no, but like, yeah, she has this whole one-sided thing with Mitsuru, which does not get developed further in this chunk of episodes, but
I can imagine it'll be
yeah,
a huge problem later because it's like, again, she's partnered with Futoshi, who is also, he's a sweetheart, but he is a
yeah,
dope.
like
And he, like, we see when they're apologizing to each other at the end of the episode that Futoshi does like a full on, like a, I think it's, I hope I'm getting the word right, a dogeza, with the,
oh, he like yeah, he bows down like
like
really
what
far,
is
and
often
yeah,
referred to as kowtowing, like
yeah,
the full bow.
yeah,
Um, and it's very cute because she's actually taken aback by it and charmed, and it's a cute moment. But it's like the thing is that she is becoming very into Mitsuru, who is just not there.
yeah.
Like no matter what you
It
think about any of the other details, it's like
the
he's very obviously not
a
interested.
problem that starts developing around this point in Darlifra, and it will become a bit more obvious as we get later on, is that the only major points of character conflict it knows how to write are like
Unrequited
character
love.
yeah, character falls in love with another character falls out of love with another character, somebody has a crush on somebody has to break two other people up. It
Oof.
constantly centers everything on romance, which
Like, no.
is like
It's
I get why, because from the
it's
show's
trying to
point of
do
view,
themes.
yeah, from the show's point of view, like there's this whole underlying theme about how love is the great unifier. Like if you have somebody who you really love and it's a mutual and healthy relationship per the show's definition of those words, uh,
Mm,
uh, you know that can get you through anything, and that's a very sweet and simple theme that you can do really well if you know what you're doing, which Darlifra does not.
and
um,
that gets really apparent in the 10th episode, but which is funny because the ninth episode actually nails it.
yeah, we can talk. Well, let's
I think we should round up this
yeah,
episode with
the one thing at the
Miku.
very end. Yeah,
Miku gets mad, like before they actually do finally apologize. Like all the rest of the girls are ready to apologize, and just settle things and recognize that, like, look, we're all being stupid and obnoxious. We need to stop. And Miku storms out, and earlier they had found on like the sort of they I think they say it's the first floor, but it's like I think that's meant in like the British sense of first floor. Um, second floor. Um, there's an
sure.
abandoned area that they find, which are old rooms, like old dorm rooms.
Yeah.
And she hides in one of them from the rest of the cast and is sulking. She notices there are stuffed toys here. There's like, it's beds that seem unmade. There's a wilted lilac cutting in a vase.
Mm.
And then she sees a photograph that looks so much like Squad 13, but
But
it's
it's not.
different
It's a bunch of
people.
different people. Yeah. And she has like a full on freak out about this, which I mean, like,
Yeah, she
understandable.
yeah, and then Zero Two just
Yeah.
says, "Oh yeah," like when they find her, he like as she's sobbing and being held, she just says, look, you think there wasn't a Squad 13 before you guys?
Yeah. Well,
And
like
they
I mean,
got
the
wiped out.
yeah, like the thing is, she doesn't even really point this out to them in like a declarative way. She just
Yeah.
says it in a way that implies that it's something that she didn't even think to mention
Yeah, like
before.
that wouldn't it have
Yeah,
occurred to you that there was a Squad 13 before you
yeah,
and that they're not alive
yeah.
anymore?
It's such a strange thing to bury in this episode. Just like an immediate like down crank of tone and just
Yeah, and it's like again, it's before the, sort of cutesy apology scene in which
oh no,
like,
it's after that,
oh
isn't
god,
it?
I no, because that occurs afterwards. Miku has finally
Yeah, no,
settled the
okay,
fuck down
you're right.
and
It's between
is like
that and the after school
and
PSA.
yeah, it's like, and actually, like the the bit with like Miku finally being like to Zorome is like, I know that you're checking me out. Do it a little less, but I know that you will anyway because I'm just that cute. It's like, it's endearingly immature, but it shows their relationship. It
it
would be a decent moment if it weren't juxtaposed so weirdly with how dark it gets for a moment there,
that and just the way the rest of the episode
and the way the rest of the
is,
episode played out.
But yeah. So
It
that's that episode, and then we
it,
get to
it
episode
yeah,
9, which is
which
like
good.
quite good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's my favorite of these episodes, and it focuses on Goro,
Yeah.
who is Ichigo's partner,
Yeah.
and he's like actually one of the more normal people here,
Mm-hmm.
and he's very nice.
Yeah. Like, the thing I will say is that episode 9 is one of the places where that main theme that Darlifer tries to hammer in mostly works.
Yeah.
Um, because there is a sort of a thing attached to it, which was a bit about, like, the most important thing is to be honest with your feelings and
Mm-hmm.
understanding your own feelings. And that is more important than just them being reciprocated necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it begins with like
yeah,
Goro talking to Hiro about like what it means to love somebody, and saying, I think that Ichigo loves you. Like, and also, it made me realize I know for sure that I'm in love with her. And he's like about to go to bed. And he's like
yeah,
just flops down and then says right before he falls asleep to Hiro, like just ending the conversation, is like, God, I needed to get that off my chest.
yeah. By the way, just like insane pre bedtime conversation. Just
Yeah, but it's like, it is, but it's also like, it's in character. He's just
yes,
like, God, I needed to tell somebody that I'm so in love with this girl. Yes. And like, yeah, maybe she's not into me, but I don't care because maybe you'll make her happy. I don't know.
essentially, yeah. Um,
And it's, again, it's like, he's just like a very, for the most part, very laid back
yeah.
character. And then the
Well,
plantation is attacked by a giant Portuguese man of war.
yeah. Well, like that's the thing, right? The actual plot of this episode is really simple.
Mm-hmm.
All that happens, like to super quickly summarize it, all that happens is that there's that little conversation at the beginning. The plantation gets attacked by a giant jellyfish, Klaxosaur. Um,
With
they
alien nine tentacles, because
you were very
huh.
keen on pointing that out, yes.
I just thought it was funny is that they did the drill tentacles that the Borg have in
I
Alien 9, and that's hysterical to me.
they get attacked by that. Squad 13 goes out to fight it, and the Goro and Ichigo's mech gets stuck inside of it. and Ichigo is ejected from it, but Goro is stuck inside
Hmm.
the mech, inside the Plaxosaur, and there is a very real possibility that he will die either from the reserve power on the FranXX itself running out, or several other things. Um, and again, all that happens basically is that they go out and they rescue him, and he's fine, and
Well,
they blow
there
up the
is
Klaxosaur. But in
there is
that,
the argument before then, and where Miku, like, so they're all trying to talk to Goro, like Goro just woke up inside of the robot, and like after that, it's like they're gonna be sent out to kill the Klaxosaur, but that it might not involve rescuing Goro.
yeah,
And Ichigo is like obviously pissed. Miku, like, brushing past Zorome, who's like, oh fuck, and just runs away. It's like very good, like, wordless character acting going on there.
mm,
Um, is like she confronts uh Ichigo, and she's kind of right. Is like, why do you put all this shit on this guy and just like I'm not explaining it well, but it's basically just sort of throwing the fact that Ichigo kind of takes Goro for granted in her face,
yeah.
and
Um,
and then just like Ichigo does, like, after this point she just like breaks the fuck down, like, I am going to save you, I need to do that, like, because she does actually care very deeply for Goro, just not in the same way that Goro cares about her. And
yeah,
it's
I
like,
mean, like what I was going to get at is like in these very simple broad strokes, it's a lot of character
mm,
building
yeah,
like this.
oh yeah,
Um, with these conversations, it's again, it's one of the better episodes just in terms of like actually understanding what this show
wants
works
to be
with.
about.
Yeah,
Yes.
like the ways that it can translate that to an actual, plot and have it
Yes.
make emotional sense. Um,
Hmm.
because when they eventually go to rescue him, they find that, well, specifically Ichigo, who is like launched into the Klaxosaur. Um,
Yeah, like Strelitzia carries her
yeah.
there, like just in her suit, but otherwise like completely unprotected.
Mm-hmm.
They find that there's like a kind of
A
like,
chimney basically on the
yeah,
Klaxosaur. Yeah.
because of the way that it's like this. It's actually a very interesting, creepy, cool bit of monster design. Is the way that it's like it it evaporates parts of its internal fluids and blows up these sort of balloons around itself that it can explode to send away, well, basically predators, but which is to say, you know, FranXX's. And she gets chucked into its like exhaust pipe mouth thing at the top and swims down into it to Goro, who Goro, expecting that he will not be able to be rescued,
Yeah.
is initiating a self destruct.
Yeah. And she gets there like really in the nick
When
of
his
time.
hand is on
Yeah.
the switch.
Yeah. I remember you specifically. You were like, "Oh no, I don't want them to kill this character who I'm like starting to like." Uh,
Yeah, like, he's,
it's an
again, he's very
effective fake
likable.
out. Like,
It's a very effective fake out, and then she appears, and like, wow, the air's thin in here, and it's like there's like this very sweet little exchange there, and like a good kind of like moment of just demonstrating genuine trust between two people.
yeah,
And what they do is they activate the robot. They get out of the Klaxosaur, but leave behind the self-destructing auxiliary fuel, and it blows the thing sky high.
yeah,
It's very good.
yeah. They
It's
blow it up
it's
with the fuel cell.
yeah, it just goes kablooey. Always satisfying.
Very nice explosion animation in that episode.
Yeah, it is a good explosion animation. And so when they get back down to Earth, like obviously Goro is like barely conscious, and Ichigo is like, tending to him a bit, and is like, and he just says straight up, "I love you," and she's like, I don't know really how to feel about that, and he's like, that's okay. It's just I needed to tell you that.
Yeah.
And also there's a plot point about how many ages ago as a present Goro wanted, because there's a whole thing of that Goro was originally like, he just got sick of having to deal with other people who he didn't relate to as a kid, and used to constantly get into fights, despite the fact that he's was at the time very physically weak and small. And Ichigo protected him, and that was, he realizes, the first time that he really fell in love with her. And he wanted to get her a present, which was like a little clip for her bangs, and Hiro did before he did, and so he's kept that clip.
Yeah.
For years.
Which in any other context would seem weird and kind of creepy, but in this episode specifically, it works.
It works. It's like, it's just that he's never like, he's kind of like held it. It's this symbol of him just having held a torch for her forever, and then he like, because her clip fell off when she was trying to rescue him, he hands her that, and it's very sweet. If like, it'd be like, it would be so corny, but in context, it's cute.
Yeah. What I will say is this, right? I think this is an episode that you like more than I do.
Yes.
I think it's good. It's not one of my personal favorites, but it is an episode that works on a basic like emotional logic level, which I will take corny or over prepared or any of that kind of thing over what we have in the episode after this, which we can get to in a second here. I'm going to put in a cut, and then when we get back, we can talk about the last episode of this 5-episode batch.
All right.
Which is episode 10. Hello. We missed some things.
So, one thing I wanted to mention briefly about episode 9 at the end is that there's like a little bit of a flashback in terms of like Goro's memories of, because again, he started out as like this tiny little weakling picking fights, and he has become like the tallest and in some ways most conventionally attractive person in the group. And he's like, and it's kind of funny is like that he's reflecting on his friendship with Hiro and his relationship with Ichigo, and it's really interesting to see, because again, in a show that actually, came through on some, like it actually cashed its proverbial checks on the sort of subverting gender roles thing.
Yeah.
He sees Ichigo as his hero.
Yes.
Like he genuinely like sees her as a person who saved his life, and it's very sweet. And he's like, and he's actually in a way fine with Hiro, being the person that Ichigo loves, simply because it will make her happy, even if he can't. Yeah.
The other thing we need to mention quick before we move on is that we are introduced to a blonde character in one of these episodes. I don't even remember which one.
In episode 6.
It's episode 6 all the way back. Okay.
And then they show up again.
They
later.
Do.
They're androgynous, short-haired character who's from Squadron 9, who knows Zero too.
Yeah. That is important to note, because that character becomes very important later on. Anyway, episode 10.
the one that kind of honks.
I'll go farther. This is I don't really remember how I felt about this episode when watching the show the first time. Rewatching it, it actively pissed me off.
Yeah,
This is the first episode of the show where I'm like, this sucks. Like,
in the
just
notes, I am frankly somewhat disgusted
yeah,
with
that is what I
yeah,
wrote. Yes,
yeah,
verbatim.
and it's like, yeah, I get it. It's like, cause okay, the directing in this episode is pretty solid.
It
Um,
is. But you
but
should like summarize the broad beats of what happens
all
because
right,
you're good at that.
so the so knockoff Sele decides to bring our heroes into the city in the center of the plantation as for an awards ceremony, which is of course hollow and meaningless, but it'll, motivate them.
Yeah,
And of course, Zorome doesn't understand what an award is, but he gets very excited when he realizes that he'll be recognized in the city. And they're initially, it's kind of interesting is that they go into the city and are talked to by these guys, from the proverbial military brass. And, Zorome, who idolizes the adults, as they're known, um, is just like initially happy, but then
absolutely
feels
starstruck, and then
he's totally starstruck, but
yeah,
then he gets kind of like discomfited when there's like nothing happens, basically,
yeah, no,
and
they
they're just sent back.
yeah, all that happens the ceremony, quote unquote, is these guys in these hats uh give them some medals, and there's a short little speech, and that is genuinely it.
Yeah, and Zarme notably tries to shake hands with the guy, like just out of compulsion, and
Mm-hmm.
the guy just kind of stares at him and then moves on.
Yeah,
Just the coldest shit. Like, it's basically just a total mismatch of expectations because Zorome just again is like this hyperactive puppy of a kid,
mm-hmm.
and you know like he desperately wants to please people while like projecting this aura of confidence, but really he desperately wants approval,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just struck down like that, and it's like a knife to his heart.
And as a result, he ends up kind of wandering around the city on their way back because they go
Yeah,
on foot, which is in of itself apparently unusual. Um,
yeah.
and what happens is he ends up kind of wandering away from the group, and he like ends up
He
in a
he's on an industrial elevator
yeah
that rises up, leaves him. He's like looking at like a power plant, like the sort of exhaust from a power plant turning on and off, and he finds that really interesting.
mm-hmm.
And he gets stuck up on this platform and cannot get down. Walks over to some elevators. This scene is actually pretty effectively unsettling and weird because it's like it kind of nails the feeling of being in a place you're not supposed to be
You know, you
when
like
no one else is there.
accidentally end up in the back in a grocery store or something. Sure.
Yeah, or like you get stuck in a mall after hours
Something like
and
that. Yeah.
everything's closed, and it's like trying to find a way out. And so he sees a guard at one point, and the guard ignores him. And then he sees another person further down, and he tries to climb down the side of this, like, sort of sloped wall with a bunch of pipes, trips and falls and knocks himself out.
Yeah.
And then he is brought back by the person who he landed in front of to their apartment. Um, and this person, now it should be noted that, like, sort of a thing with the adults is that they all sort of obscure their faces and their forms
Yeah.
with these kind of veil hat things. It's very
Which is whew.
it's like it is very much evocative of like any number of like historical closed societies that do shit like this, but it's turned up to 11.
Yes, it is also a thing that will come back later in the show in a truly terrible way. But point being, there is a sort of enforced androgyny.
Androgyny would be.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Got there.
But so we initially are not privy to who this person is who takes Zorome back to their house and helps him rest up. Eventually, she takes off her hood hat thing and reveals that she is a woman, and she
An
is one
older
of
woman.
yeah. She is one of the quote unquote adults that lives in the inner city, and she has gray hair. She wears this weird jumpsuit with like
Yeah,
a
unitard.
heart. Yeah, like with a heart over like where her heart would be internally, like on the jumpsuit. And she's got these odd looking kind of glassy eyes.
Which are violent.
Yes. Um and you know, she gives Zorame tea and these little puffball pastries to try to help him.
Like they seem to be like mochi.
They might be mochi. I hadn't thought of that. They're probably mochi, yeah.
And he's very excited about that. And she says, taste doesn't matter to me very much at this point as long as I get nutrients, but I'm glad you're happy.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And it's like, and he's very confused by this statement and generally becomes more and more confused as they talk, partly because he recognizes her from somewhere. Like, at the beginning of the episode is like, the very beginning, there's a glimpse of like a dream that he had involving light at a distance and him approaching it. And
so
he's reminded of that.
yeah, so the unlike literally everything else that they try to imply this episode, they don't hammer on this part super hard, but the vague implication is that this woman is Zorome's mother, or at least the person who was his caretaker at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the recognition that is there is very dim and non-specific, so we don't really get that directly. That's just kind of left unsaid, and it's all very ambiguous. What is not ambiguous is that as she and Zorome talk, it becomes clear that what Darlifer is depicting in the inner plantation city is this very dystopian, like everybody has all their needs met, but no one is allowed to take any risks kind of society. A very you mentioned that this kind of again reminded you of like what a lot of like North American YA dystopian fiction does.
Yes,
and
like the whole like especially because of the fact that like a lot of it is targeted at teenagers and goes into that whole alienation and regimentation thing and leans in hard in a very blunt on the nose and often weirdly like sometimes gender coded or like inadvertently conservative way.
Yeah, well, here the form that this takes is, you know, she's showing Zorame around her apartment. We are shown her husband or partner, as she insists on calling him, who is not really even conscious. He's in this like weird bed coffin thing with like a creepy grin on his face.
Because he's having dopamines directly injected into his brain. Because and it's sort of like it feels like the logical endpoint to the point of parody of like when you like the disintegration of a relationship between two people where they
Well,
progressively become so
I
alienated from
mean,
each other
here's like
that
this is the part that
yeah.
pisses me off. Actually, like the notion that because this is clearly what the show is going for is what you just
Mm,
said. Um,
yeah.
this whole thing where they pair these people up basically arbitrarily and they obviously don't care about each other. The notion that specifically what this is a very thin metaphor for, which is a sexless relationship, or if you want to be slightly more charitable, a loveless relationship,
Yeah, like
um,
where you get two
is
people who don't understand each
yeah,
other really.
which is like the notion that this is like the worst thing that could ever happen to somebody. Just I don't know what it is about that just make like it just like nails on a chalkboard to me in terms of writing.
Yeah.
I like this whole sequence. It's so drawn out. Like this is most of the episode. Um, like this whole sequence, they just hammer on this over and over and over, and it's just really weird and off-putting in a way that does not seem even remotely intentional. Like
Yeah, it's like how do you manage to throw like but simultaneously throw like A-spec people, queer people, and like just older people who are just sort of have their own lives, or just people who in general have relationships where they like to do stuff apart
yeah,
under the bus all at once in
yeah,
this very over the top fashion that it feels like it low key insults almost everybody, including even people who like spend all their time together,
yeah.
or including straight people, because it's like, man, that's a lot of weird pressure you're
Yeah.
putting on
Well,
us over here.
this is the one. Like again, like this was the batch of episodes where people started making the Shinzo Abe jokes because,
Yes. Yeah.
because
Oh boy.
like this betrays a. It, and to a certain kind of person, it's going to sound like we're overreacting, but it, if you haven't seen any of this show, at least watch this episode, at least like a little bit of it, and you'll understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, like
It's
why this pisses
very
people off.
it's just the way this is presented is so just like it betrays a very conservative
Mm,
worldview.
yeah,
Uh,
which is ironic because you could see it as in some ways being like opposed to the idea of things like arranged marriages, which,
yeah,
but at the same time, it's not like so reactionary that it goes into that territory, but it's like a different kind of very conservative.
yeah. Well, it's one of these things where like it doesn't seem to realize how this it's being because
Yes.
you know if you come at it from the show's point of view, what you end up with is sort of you know, if you have this mindset, your thought is, well, you know, the main purpose of a marriage is for the two people in it to love each other and ideally, to have kids and contribute to the betterment of society. And from that point of view, what the dystopia inside the plantations cities is terrible because you've got uh, these people who are arbitrarily paired off, don't care about each other, are forcibly separated from and like removed of all connection with their children.
They
So
also
by the way, also just manages to like randomly kind of piss on adopted people, but you
yeah,
know,
and and like the whole idea of like sort of found family fostering all that
yeah,
uh just like it also like there's also the whole bit of like when they take Zoro back is that like they refer to him as infected, and like she is disinfecting things, and he it like there's initially right before that is like that he talks about wanting to be friends with her, the
Yes.
woman, in the future, and she says, "I don't think that's possible because," and then she gets cut off. Um, there's an You know what it feels like to me is like my prediction, having not seen this, is like that they're infected because they are produced by natural coupling as opposed to
Clones or
like grown
something.
in vats.
Uh, Here's what I'll say. The fact that all signs point to this society being deliberately arranged this way by the higher ups. So, Ape or whoever is like the intermediary between them and the rest of the people in the plantation. The fact that that's clearly engineered rather
Mm-hmm.
than being like a societal adaptation of some kind, um, ends up hitting a really fucking unpleasant note at some point, and
Hmm.
I will point it out when we get there.
Yeah, something of a kind of why is this ringing cabal of international bankers notes for me?
Yeah. But like, it's just the way they managed to take something that's like this plot point in the abstract is innocuous. It's what you say with it and what you set up as the dystopia
Yeah.
that like drives like what the themes you want to talk about are. And the thing that would make more sense to me is if you have it so that these people all live in single units by themselves.
Yeah.
Like that would make more sense. Or I mean, there's like other things you could do, but
Or even other ways that you could set up the whole, oh, this person is basically completely detached from reality now,
yeah,
but like imply in a way that they used to have like something kind of, but they're forced to stay together for some reason, that sort of thing.
maybe that too. Or
Like, which would have totally different implications in and of
yeah,
itself. And then also like I will also say the way that it's structured is that like all of the ominous reveals and like, kind of like,
you can see them coming a mile
yeah, is
away.
that
Yeah,
like they're supposed to be surprising, but they're set up in a way that is like so unsurprising that it's like, oh wow, you've been taking so many notes from like a very rote set of kind of
influences.
ways that
Yeah,
this thing is written. And also we just have to point out the whole thing with the stem coffin is that it's very TV is creating hikikomori in its
something
vibes.
like that. I mean, like that's the whole thing too. Is like famously, a lot of conservatives tend to get on the horse of like, you know, TV is corrupting our youth and making them stay
Yeah,
inside and not, and they don't want to get jobs and blah 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 whatever.
they're becoming otaku and not fucking.
It is something like that,
As
but like,
opposed to blaming as opposed to blaming like say Japanese work culture, which is terrifying.
yeah, well, like I
Um,
mean, the thing
in the same
is,
way that American work, in different ways, but many of the same ways that American work culture
yeah,
is terrifying.
I mean, like the
Um,
thing is, like you can, if you're being very charitable, you can be like, okay, well, they didn't think this through, and these implications are unintentional.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I have the gift of knowledge, so I
Oh
know that
god, we're
that's
gonna get to that interview.
yeah. Oh, that's not even what I meant. I just meant the rest of the show. Uh,
Oh boy,
but
yeah.
like
Oh man.
it's very from where I'm sitting, it's very hard to make the case that this is merely, uh, you know, casting too wide a net, which is the sort of thing that is like that in of itself would be pretty bad, but you could forgive it if the show was otherwise not like that. But
Yeah.
Darlie for kind of is. And the thing that puzzles me most, we actually haven't discussed, now that I'm thinking about it, how the episode actually ends, which is literally just uh, she calls the guards you mentioned who describe Zorome as infected, and he gets sent back topside to the plantation itself. And it is mentioned ominously that Zorome no longer has the dream that he has in the first part of the episode of,
Yeah.
this, whatever that's trying to say. You know, again, like there's this whole thing with like the bond between caretaker and child being forcibly severed. That
Mm.
it, I don't know. The thing that really puzzles me about this is that, again, like one of the things that you need to understand Darlifra is to understand that it badly wants to be a couple of other mecha anime. One of which is Erika 7, and Erika 7 has like a huge thing about found family. And the fact that they would in this show like go out of their way to be like to avoid that, um and seemingly to portray that as kind of a bad thing is just like baffling to me. um there is some stuff later on that is more positive on that concept, but again, like you just end up with this sort of thing where the show then becomes at odds with itself, and it's like, what are we doing here then?
Yeah, it's also like I sort of said was that like wow, it's clearly aping on Erika 7 and Evangelion. There are also parallels to be drawn with specifically with Razafon. Is like especially there's actually like a lot like not to spoil anything with Razafon, although Razafon has so much weird stuff going on that like actually spoiling it is very hard.
Hmm.
Um, with a couple of exceptions, is like that there is. It also does stuff with, funnily enough, also has like a motif of blue blood as a thing. Um, uh,
Darlifra taking ideas from other shows? No.
and also has a highly significant pink-haired character who has more in common, honestly, with Rei Ayanami than with Zero Two, but is also kind of her own thing. But
Hmm.
there's like also the nature of the hierarchy of the antagonists in Razafon feels like it's being heavily cribbed from in some respects. The There's another point is that I started to notice with the Klaxosaurs is were the Klaxosaurs at some point people? Like, granted, we know that Zero Two is based on like Klaxosaur and human DNA, and that we see Hero kind of like it recedes and is left as only a scar, but kind of seeming to slowly turn into one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sort of a parallel thing going on in Razafon, which I'm not going to like get into because there's
Interesting.
some really interesting emotional stuff that Razafon does with that.
Yeah,
Um,
I
but it's like
I will admit that Rosafon is a blind spot for me in this comparison. I have not seen that,
yeah,
but
it's like
I
it
would not
feels
be I would
like
not be surprised if it turned out that this also badly wanted to be Rosafon. I mean,
yeah,
again,
it feel like the thing about Razafon, as I said when I first brought this up when we were watching this, is like Razafon is one of those shows that people will like straight up tell you to like read the show's lore bible to like fully understand what the fuck's going on by the end. Um,
well, if we ever
because
do a podcast about Rosafon, we can get into
yeah,
that.
it's like it is a but the thing is that Razafon's actually it actually kind of mostly earns that sort of like trust from the audience that like okay this has a lot going on that's gonna like maybe go over my head,
Yeah,
but you
you
accept it because it's like
yeah,
it's a good show,
you have
right?
to work to get that much rope. Yeah. Um, which
Yeah.
Darlifra, like, I mean, going by the 10 episodes that we've talked about so far, I'm just going to pretend the rest of the show is a mystery to me, even though it's not, as I say this. Like, going by the 10 episodes we've seen so far, we've seen some good stuff, but we've also seen some kind of questionable stuff. It does not have the weight to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, like
certainly, especially not yet.
Yeah,
like it. This
it's
is
also like
just a
if
a bad and weird episode overall.
yeah, especially because like also for one thing, Rasafan has way more relevant adult characters, um, who
Well,
are
okay.
also highly complex.
To be fair, in Darlifra's case, the lack of those is kind of part of the point, but also the point is stupid. So,
but also in Razafan, there's kind of a point of it being very much in some ways about adolescence, and it's like the main character being a teenager and going through all kinds of shit. In some ways, oh my god, yeah, Hero in some ways is like a very watered down version of Ayato from Razafan. Holy shit. Okay. This is starting to click for me. Oh no.
Well, we did make the observation that in general, just in a broad sense, Nishigori, the director, writer, series compositor, several things, for Darlifra, it kind of has the air of somebody who has been in the industry for a long time doing like key animation and stuff like that. Started to get more roles as an animation director and things of that nature, and started working with people he clearly admired a lot, and that Darlifra is perhaps part of, partly at least, in some way, part of some scheme to be like, look, I can also make a masterpiece in this like genre.
He started out as a fanboy who started actually working for Gainax and then with Kara, and he, in becoming an understudy to his idols, he decided to make something that would make Senpai notice him. And Senpai in question is like Hideaki Anno, Tsurumaki, Enokido, who worked on Razafan as well, in addition to a bunch of like other work in that kind of vein. Also Star Driver, which feels also like a precursor to this.
The other one I would actually point out that this draws some stuff from is Die Buster, which Nishigori actually worked on in some capacity. I forget,
but that's
what exactly
again Tsurumaki.
Yeah, it was an animation thing.
It's
our point being overall, just the show, again, even this early on, is very much a product of its influences, and with episodes like this one, you get a phenomenon where it adds up to less than the sum of its parts.
To a deeply frustrating degree, especially just episode 10. It's like what I said before is like, God, it's basically like what I wrote down is like the character drama and the action are really strongly realized, right? They are the twin emotional and dynamic cores of this whole show. The show does not the people who are writing this show do not understand that fact, and the surrounding buttressing elements of the world building and the whole dystopia aspect and its attempts at other themes actively harm those central components and undermine them in really unfortunate ways. Like, it takes away from the color and the power of these things, which are, again, like, you have like Trigger at your disposal, who are, the people who are involved in that, even when their shows aren't very good, they generally have a good understanding of that, right? Like, people have been pretty harsh on, for example, Kisniver, but like Kisniver has like, well, at least has stuff going on,
the convoluted metaphor I'm going to make here is that it's like trying to build like a really grandiose building, like a church or something, but you don't have enough materials, so you end up with this weird kind of lopsided thing.
Yeah.
Where, some parts of it would hold up just fine if they were properly supported, but they're not, as you said. But, like...
And then you're gonna just collapse on your parishioners eventually.
I mean, if you want to further extend this tortured metaphor, like, we just were through, like, the first few weeks of operation where the weather was mostly clear. And now we're gonna be...
oh god, we're entering the Fail Sun Sagrada Familia.
The what?
The Fail Sun Sagrada Familia of anime. The Sagrada Familia is a famous church in Barcelona.
No, I don't fucking know that, you nerd.
It's a really famous piece of architecture. It's really cool looking. It looks like a drippy sandcastle, except like it's an actual building. And it was under construction for like 50 years. And I don't think it's technically ever been completed, but it's still used, right? But this is the Fail Sun Sagrada Familia.
Going to kill
right?
you.
It's like that, look, but it sucks.
Here's the thing, right? There's some shows that are like this that I will go to bat for. Mostly they're shows that I think don't fuck up in as egregious a ways as Darlifra does for the first time with this episode and will continue to do in a couple other ways.
And in more minor ways with, like, episode, 8.
8, yeah.
I would say, also. Those fucking speeches.
Yes, but the other thing is just also, like, I think about those shows, like the ones that I would go to bat for, stuff like Daybreak Illusion or like Assault Lily Bouquet or Grand Belm. Those are, I mean, for one thing, they're shorter, but for another thing, like, I never get the sense from stuff like that I'm watching something that doesn't understand what it is on like a fundamental level. And with Darlifra, you really start to get that around now. Like, this is where that first shows its head.
It's like this deep misunderstanding of itself.
Yeah, you get the, oh no, they think they're doing something, as I've put it a couple times.
It's like, oh god, it's like, and in some ways, that's kind of like, from what I've seen of certain bad YA dystopia things, is like, that's sort of an endemic problem to that genre as well. Is like, you don't know the implications of what you're saying, and you just keep talking.
I will say, you don't know the implications of what you're saying is the generous way to interpret Darling in the Franxx. You can be much meaner than I've been tonight, and will continue to mostly be. I know people who think that this is like one of the worst anime ever made. I think that's kind of much, but I get why people think that, because
look, we have together seen like Love Flops, Speed Grapher, Pride of Orange,
some garbage,
like
some real garbage.
God, Magical Spec Ops Asuka, The Line.
Don't call it that.
Yeah, that's a little unfair to Spec
No,
Ops
like,
The
the thing is, like, we've seen some true, like,
heinous shit.
Stuff that's like genuinely barely watchable. This
Lucifer
isn't
and
that.
the Biscuit Hammers adaptation.
Oh, don't even get me fucking started.
Oh god.
But like, this isn't one of those situations, but it's deeply disappointing. And I want to point out we have 14 more episodes to watch, and here's the truly frustrating part, right? And this is going to be our closing note for this episode. The show's best episodes are still ahead of us too.
Yeah.
And that is what really ticks me off is that there's moments, again, like you go back to the first part of this very episode where we're talking about episode 6, or a bit ago when we're talking about episode 9. There's places where it actually plays to its strengths and does so well enough that you can ignore the weaknesses. But this is the point where it becomes clear that you do have to willingly ignore the weaknesses even during those moments. Um, and that's going to become even more obvious as we move forward.
And once we move into the
Yeah.
final 2/5 of this,
Yeah. But hey,
yeah.
the next episode will cover the batch that is episodes 6. Episodes 11 through 15. And that has my favorite episode of the show in it. So something to look forward to.
Yeah. It's all downhill from there.
Yeah, basically, actually, yeah.
Oh boy. Again, like, one day we have to watch Razafon together to truly wash the taste of this out of our mouths.
There's
also fucking Daybreak Illusion. We will get back to that.
Hey, let's not make promises we can't keep. I want to. I actually quite like that show. That show's got
I like what I've seen of it. It's
quite a few problems also,
it is
but
weird, messy show with some problems, but it's from what I've seen, the lows are not nearly as low as certain points in especially 8 and 10 here.
Yeah.
And I know it's going to get worse.
Yep. And on that note, good night, everybody. We will see you in 2
everyone.
weeks.
Watch better anime than this.